Sometimes what we cherish the most can be what ultimately destroys us. This is the story of Zayne Marston, a renowned orca trainer at Pacific Horizons Marine Park. His unshakable bond with a creature he considered both a friend and partner was shattered in an instant, unleashing a tragedy that would haunt the park forever. July 18, 2010 began as a typical summer day in Santa Barbara, California. The sun shone over Pacific Horizons Marine Park, where families gathered for the afternoon's performance. The crowd eagerly awaited the Orca show, with Boreas, the park's 21-foot star, ready to perform. Known for his sleek black and white markings and powerful movements, Boreas was the main attraction, captivating the audience with his grace. Yet, despite the excitement, something that would soon shatter the illusion of control. Pacific Horizons Marine Park had been founded in 1992 by Robert Layton. Initially focused on educational exhibits and marine life rescue, Layton's vision was to create a more intimate connection between visitors and the ocean. However, as competition grew, the park expanded its attractions in the early 2000s to remain competitive. By 2005, it had rebranded itself as a premier destination, securing major investments and bringing in larger, more dramatic exhibits. The park's new star was Boreas, a 21-foot male orca. Boreas, marketed as the largest and most majestic orca on the West Coast, quickly became the centerpiece of the park's growing appeal. Born in 1992 off the coast of Norway, Boreas was captured at the age of 5, torn from his pod, and sold into captivity. Life in confinement proved difficult for him, and signs of his distress were evident from the start. Researchers noted his unnatural vocalizations and periods of isolation, suggesting he had never fully adjusted to life in captivity. Despite these signs, Pacific Horizons pushed Boreas to perform, and his breathtaking breaches and graceful movements made him the star attraction, drawing in crowds who marveled at his power and beauty. Yet, beneath his polished performances, the tension between his wild instincts and life in captivity continued to grow. At the heart of Pacific Horizons' success was Zayne Marston, a 35-year-old marine biologist and trainer who had grown up surrounded by the park's exhibits and animals. Drawn to marine life from an early age, Zayne had spent years shadowing trainers, learning the ins and outs of animal care and performance. His deep connection to the park was personal, as he had always felt a sense of duty to his uncle Robert Layton, the park's founder. Zayne's natural talent with marine animals and his passion for conservation made him the perfect fit for training Boreas, the park's star orca. Over the years, Zayne developed a unique bond with Boreas, often referring to the orca not just as a performer, but as a friend and partner, a connection that became the foundation of their many successful performances. But by 2009, cracks began to appear in Boreas's behavior. Trainers noticed signs of agitation, tail slapping, refusal to perform, and episodes of vocal distress that suggested the orca was struggling. Zayne, concerned for Boreas's well-being, recommended reducing his workload and giving him more time for enrichment. However, these concerns were dismissed by the park's management, who were more focused on maintaining high visitor numbers and profits. Despite these warnings, Zayne remained committed to his work with Boreas, believing their bond would keep the situation under control. On July 18, 2010, the stage was set for another performance, one that was supposed to be just like the others. Boreas thrilled the crowd with his stunning breaches and synchronized movements. Zayne, confident in their partnership, prepared for the grand finale, an in-water routine where he would swim alongside Boreas, showcasing the bond they had spent years building. But as the act unfolded, something unexpected happened. Without warning, Boreas veered off course. His sleek body, once moving in perfect harmony with Zayne's cues, suddenly turned. Zayne, submerged in the water beside him, tried to regain control, but Boreas was no longer responding. In an instant, the orca lunged toward him with shocking speed. The audience gasped in disbelief as Boreas's powerful jaws clamped around Zayne's torso. He was dragged underwater with terrifying force, his body thrashing in the orca's grip. Zayne struggled, but Boreas's hold was unrelenting, dragging him deeper into the tank. The crowd erupted into chaos, unsure if this was part of the act or something much worse. Trainers on the platform screamed for help, throwing buoys and fish into the water in a desperate attempt to distract Boreas. But the orca was consumed by aggression, thrashing violently in the water as Zayne's body was tossed like a rag doll. For nearly 2 minutes, the attack continued. Boreas's massive form seemed unstoppable as he dragged Zayne deeper into the water, shaking him with brutal force. Zayne fought to break free, but his strength was no match for the orcas. The audience, stunned and paralyzed with horror, could only watch as the chaos unfolded. Then, suddenly, Boreas released Zayne, and his limp body floated to the surface. Divers scrambled into the water, pulling Zayne from the tank, but it was too late. His injuries were catastrophic: fractured ribs, a punctured lung, and severe internal bleeding. Medics rushed to his side, performing CPR at the edge of the tank, but it was clear that the damage was irreparable. Zayne was pronounced dead at the scene. The aftermath of Zayne's death was swift and devastating. Critics accused Pacific Horizons of negligence, pointing to ignored warnings about Boreas's behavior. Animal rights groups seized on the tragedy, using it to fuel their campaigns against the captivity of orcas. Protests erupted outside the park, calling for justice and demanding an end to the exploitation of marine mammals. Zayne's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit, revealing internal communications that showed Zayne's concerns had been dismissed by management. The lawsuit was settled, but the damage to the park's reputation was irreparable. Within a year, Pacific Horizons closed its doors for good, and Boreas was relocated to a marine sanctuary in Iceland, where he could live freely. The incident had lasting effects on the industry, reigniting the debate over the ethics of keeping orcas in captivity. Zayne's bond with Boreas ended in a violent outburst. But what happens when the line between trainer and animal is crossed not by aggression but by desperation? Lena Weston's connection with the orca Nero seemed unshakable, until the very animal she trusted most turned on her. Was it simply a moment of miscommunication or something deeper? As Lila would soon find out, even the closest relationships can fracture when the raw instincts of a wild animal come to the forefront. It was a serene afternoon on July 11, 2006 in Monterey, California. The sun hung lazily in the sky, casting long, golden rays over the Pacific Ocean. Seaside Marine Park, a beloved local attraction, buzzed with life as visitors strolled past exhibits, taking in the beauty of the coastal setting. The sound of waves crashing gently against the shore blended with the laughter of children and the distant calls of seagulls. The bright, warm atmosphere belied the tension that quietly simmered beneath the surface, especially for those who worked behind the scenes. Seaside Marine Park, nestled along the stunning coast of Monterey, California, had been a popular attraction since its opening in 1987. Initially focused on rehabilitating injured marine life, the park expanded in the late 1990s to feature high-energy shows with dolphins, sea lions, and eventually its prized orca Nero. Captured off the coast of Iceland in 1995, Nero was separated from his pod at just 3 years old, an experience that left a mark on the young orca. Despite his early trauma, Nero quickly became the park's star. Seaside Marine Park averaged 8,000 visitors weekly, with the orca shows accounting for nearly 60% of ticket sales. By 2006, Nero was performing 5 shows per week, each featuring choreographed routines that emphasized his size and agility. His powerful size, 19 feet long and weighing 9,000 pounds, and his high-energy performances made him a crowd favorite. However, beneath his majestic exterior, Nero's behavior began to show signs of distress. Lila Weston, 25, had always been captivated by the ocean. Growing up in San Francisco, she spent countless hours watching documentaries about marine life, her curiosity about the creatures beneath the surface shaping her childhood. Her fascination with orcas was sparked at age 7 during a family trip to Seaside Marine Park, where she first saw Nero perform. From that moment, she was determined to work with marine mammals. Her older sister Emma had already set the path, working as a senior trainer at Seaside Marine Park when Lila was still in high school. Inspired by Emma's dedication, Lila pursued a degree in marine biology and joined the park as a trainer in 2005. The two sisters formed a close-knit team, working side by side, with Lila quickly becoming one of Nero's primary trainers. Compassionate, driven, and deeply empathetic, Lila was respected by her colleagues for her ability to balance professionalism with genuine care for the animals she worked with. Outside the park, Lila spent her weekends volunteering at wildlife rescue centers and hiking along the California coast, always feeling connected to nature. By early 2006, however, Lila began noticing subtle changes in Nero's behavior. The once majestic orca, whose high-energy performances had always captivated the crowd, started showing signs of stress. Nero began slamming his tail against the tank walls, refusing to eat and ignoring commands. Lila documented these changes carefully, concerned that the constant demands of his performance schedule were taking a toll on him. Despite her repeated warnings to park management, they dismissed her concerns, claiming Nero's behavior was within the normal limits for a captive orca. She confided in Emma just days before the incident, telling her she feared for both Nero's welfare and the safety of the trainers. Emma encouraged her to keep pushing for change, but both sisters felt powerless against the park's priorities. Eventually, the park would acknowledge the danger, but far too late and in the worst way possible. As the audience settled into their seats on June 11th for the park's most popular show, the Orca performance, Lila stood at the edge of the tank. Emma stood by her side watching intently. The sisters shared quiet worries amongst themselves about Nero's increasingly concerning change in behavior. The performance began like any other. Nero executed his opening tricks with the usual energy, performing a series of breaches and tail slaps, thrilling the audience. Lila guided him through each movement with the precision of years of training. The crowd cheered, and Nero seemed to respond well, just as he had done so many times before. But as the show continued, Nero's behavior was becoming less predictable. He was slower to respond to commands and seemed to be distracted by something beneath the surface of the water. Yet the performance went on, and no one in the crowd seemed to notice. The final act of the show was always the high-flying breach, a move that had become a signature of Lila and Nero's performances. Lila would enter the water alongside Nero, swimming with him for a few moments before signaling for the grand finale. Nero would breach the water, soaring through the air and diving back down, just missing Lila's body as he arced above her. It was a thrilling display of trust and synchronization, one that had captivated audiences for years. But today, as Lila slid into the water beside him, she felt a creeping unease that she couldn't shake. Nero swam with her as he always had, but there was something off about his movements. They were jerky, less fluid, and his usual grace was replaced by a subtle tension in his body. Lila signaled for him to begin the breach, but Nero didn't follow the command. Instead, he swam around her in tight circles, his eyes wide and unfocused, as if distracted. Lila raised her hand again, more forcefully this time, but Nero didn't seem to acknowledge her. His movements became more frantic, his body tightening with every stroke. Nero failed to follow the cues, his movements growing more erratic, drifting further from the routine they had perfected. Then Nero attacked. The roar of the crowd went silent in an instant. A gasp filled the air as Nero's massive body shot toward Lila, his jaws closing around her leg with terrifying speed. The water churned violently as Nero dragged Lila under, his strength overwhelming. Lila screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the roar of the tank. For a moment, the audience was frozen in confusion, unsure if this was part of the act. But when they saw the frantic flailing of Lila's body and the blood rising to the surface, the reality of the situation became tragically clear. trainers on the platform rushed to act, tossing life rings and shouting commands in a desperate attempt to redirect Nero's attention. But the Orca remained unresponsive, his focus solely on Lila. Nero continued to thrash violently, slamming Lila's body against the walls of the tank, each impact more brutal than the last. The crowd screamed in horror as the unthinkable unfolded before them. Lila fought against the Orca's grip, but she was no match for his raw power. For nearly 3 minutes, Nero held onto her, the struggle becoming more desperate with each passing second. Finally, with a forceful jerk, Nero released Lila. Her unconscious body floated to the surface of the tank, limp and lifeless. The trainers dove into the water, pulling her from the tank as paramedics rushed to the scene. Lila was quickly rushed to Monterey Community Hospital, but the damage was severe. Despite the efforts of the medical team, Lila was pronounced dead at 3:42 p.m., just over an hour after the attack. In the aftermath, evidence surfaced showing Nero's behavior had been escalating for months and that Lila had repeatedly voiced her concerns. Despite this, the park had failed to take action. Seaside Marine Park never recovered. Attendance dwindled and sponsors withdrew their support. By mid-2007, the park announced its closure. Nero, the orca who had been at the center of the tragedy, was relocated to a marine sanctuary off the coast of British Columbia, where he could live in a more natural environment. Lila's experience with captive orcas was not an isolated incident. In our next story, we turn to one of the most infamous names in marine parks, SeaWorld. Known worldwide yet steeped in controversy, it sets the stage for another heartbreaking tale. This time, we reveal the story of Jonathan Smith, a man whose encounter with a captive orca exposed the desperate longing of these majestic creatures to return to the wild. It was a crisp, breezy morning on July 6, 1991 in San Diego, California. The SeaWorld park, normally bustling with families and eager tourists, seemed quieter than usual as the sounds of excited chatter and laughter filled the air. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a soft glow over the crowd, while the occasional call of a distant seagull added to the peaceful ambiance. Visitors milled about, absorbing the sights and sounds of the ocean, unaware that the performance they were about to witness would shatter the tranquil mood and lead to a tragic event that would leave a permanent scar on the park's legacy. Jonathan Smith, a 20-year-old marine animal trainer, stood backstage near the massive Orca tank. He had always dreamed of working with marine animals, and at such a young age, his dream had come true. Jonathan had recently been hired at SeaWorld, and this performance would be his first time working with Can-Do, one of the park's most famous orcas. He had heard the whispers from the other trainers about Can-Do's unpredictable behavior, but they reassured him that it was just part of the nature of working with such powerful creatures. But Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that something was different today. He was about to face Can-Do in the water, but he hadn't fully realized the risk he was about to take. Can-Do, a 19-foot orca, was one of SeaWorld's prized animals. Born in the wild off the coast of Iceland in 1977, she was captured at the age of 3 and brought to the park. Her size and strength made her a staple of the shows at SeaWorld, where she had dazzled audiences with her agility and beauty. But beneath her mesmerizing exterior, Can-Do harbored signs of distress. The years spent in captivity had begun to take a toll on her behavior. Over time, her interactions with the trainers became more unpredictable. Moments of aggression and erratic movements were becoming more frequent, especially when it was time for her to perform. Her behavior had become a known risk, though the park continued to push her into performances, as she was one of their top attractions. Jonathan had trained with orcas before, but never one as large and potentially dangerous as Can-Do. Despite his nerves, he trusted the safety protocols and the guidance of his senior trainers, who assured him everything would go smoothly. As the show began, everything seemed normal. Can-Do performed her tricks with her usual grace, thrilling the audience as she breached the surface of the tank, sending water cascading through the air. Jonathan, standing at the edge of the tank, gave her the signals, and Can-Do obeyed with the precision she had become known for. The crowd cheered as the routine went on, but as the performance neared its end and it was time for Jonathan to enter the water with Can-Do for the final act, something began to shift. Can-Do's movements became less fluid, more erratic. Her tail slapped against the water with an intensity that sent ripples across the tank. When Jonathan entered the water beside Can-Do, the orca circled him in an unsettling way, her eyes no longer meeting his, but darting around as if searching for something. Jonathan signaled for the breach the moment when Can-Do would rise above him, but instead she swam past him, ignoring his cues. Can-Do swam in tight circles, her body tense and her movements jarring. He repeated the signal more firmly this time, but Can-Do didn't respond. Suddenly, Can-Do swam directly at Jonathan. The audience gasped as Can-Do's massive body slammed into him, knocking him off his feet. Her teeth sank into his arm with terrifying force, dragging him beneath the surface. The water around them churned violently as Can-Do thrashed Jonathan, her powerful jaws clamping down on his body. Jonathan's attempts to break free were futile against the strength of the orca. He was trapped, unable to escape the grip of the animal that moments before had been his partner in the show. The crowd watched in frozen horror, their gasps turning to screams as they realized this was no longer part of the act. For several minutes, Jonathan was pulled and slammed against the tank walls. Can-Do's grip did not relent, and another orca, Keanu, joined the attack, further complicating the desperate scene. The show's other trainers screamed for help, tossing buoy rings and anything they could find into the water. But Can-Do seemed oblivious to their efforts, focused solely on the young trainer she had trapped. Blood began to cloud the water, and it became clear that the situation was dire. When Can-Do finally released Jonathan, his limp body floated to the surface unconscious. The scene was chaotic. Divers plunged into the tank, pulling Jonathan to safety, but the damage had been done. Paramedics rushed to the scene, performing CPR as Jonathan was quickly transported to a nearby hospital. Jonathan survived the incident, but suffered serious injuries, including bruised ribs, internal organ damage, and a laceration to his liver caused by Can-Do's jaws. He was hospitalized for 9 days following the attack. In the aftermath of the attack, Jonathan filed a lawsuit against SeaWorld, alleging negligence and seeking damages for the harm caused by Can-Do and the other orca involved. The lawsuit highlighted the park's failure to address the growing signs of aggression in the orcas and the risks associated with their captivity. Jonathan claimed that despite the known risks, SeaWorld had allowed him to participate in a performance with Can-Do without proper safeguards or training for handling such aggressive behavior. The lawsuit was settled out of court, but the incident brought significant attention to the safety of trainers and the ethics of orca captivity, fueling ongoing debates about the treatment of marine mammals in entertainment. Can-Do, once a symbol of SeaWorld's success, was temporarily removed from the performance schedule, though the emotional and physical scars from the attack would remain. SeaWorld continued to face scrutiny, and the tragic incident with Jonathan Smith became a painful reminder of the risks inherent in captivity. However, Jonathan Smith's harrowing incident was not the only one of its kind at SeaWorld. John Sillick, another experienced trainer, would soon face the same aggression from orcas that had gone unchecked for years. Despite the mounting incidents, SeaWorld continued to ignore the growing signs of danger. What followed would have horrific consequences, exposing just how dangerously close the park came to repeating its past mistakes. On a crisp autumn morning in 1987, the sun cast a gentle glow over SeaWorld San Diego. The park was alive with the laughter of children and the excited chatter of families, all eager to witness the day's performances. The air was filled with the scent of saltwater and the distant calls of seagulls, creating an atmosphere of anticipation and joy. However, beneath the surface of this idyllic scene, a storm was brewing. one that would soon shatter the tranquility and leave an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. John Sillick, 26, stood backstage, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and nerves. A marine mammal trainer at SeaWorld, John had dedicated his life to working with orcas and dolphins. His passion for marine life had been evident since childhood, and he had worked tirelessly to turn his dream into a reality. Known for his dedication and skill, John had formed strong bonds with the animals under his care. Today, he was set to perform a routine with two of SeaWorld's most renowned orcas, Corky and Orky 2. Corky, a female orca, was a seasoned performer with a gentle demeanor. Captured in 1969, she had spent the majority of her life in captivity. Despite the challenges she faced, Corky had become a beloved figure at SeaWorld. Known for her intelligence and grace, her bond with John was evident. They had performed together countless times, their routines a symbol of their mutual trust and understanding. Orky 2, a male orca, was a mighty presence in the water. Captured in 1968, he had spent many years at SeaWorld, contributing to numerous performances. His size and strength were awe-inspiring, but his temperament was less predictable. While he had participated in many routines, there were occasional signs of restlessness and aggression, subtle cues that often went unnoticed in the excitement of the performances. As the show commenced, the audience was captivated by the synchronized movements of Corky and John. Their routine was a highlight of the performance, showcasing the deep connection between trainer and animal. The crowd cheered, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension that had begun to surface. Orky 2, who had been performing with another trainer, was now approaching the area where John and Corky were performing. His movements were more erratic than usual, his eyes wide and unfocused. John signaled for Corky to perform a breach, a move they had executed flawlessly countless times. Corky responded, propelling herself out of the water with grace. However, as she descended, Orky 2 leapt from the water, his massive body crashing down upon John and Corky. The impact was catastrophic. John was crushed beneath the weight of the two orcas, his body pinned between them. The audience gasped in horror as the scene unfolded before their eyes. Despite the efforts of the other trainers to distract him, the orcas remained unresponsive, their focus solely on the trapped trainer. It was only after what seemed like an eternity that Orky 2 and Corky finally retreated, allowing John to be pulled from the water. John was immediately transported to the hospital where he underwent multiple surgeries to repair the extensive injuries he had sustained. He had suffered fractures to his pelvis, femur, and ribs, injuries that would leave him in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. The physical scars were evident, but the emotional and psychological toll was profound. In the aftermath of the incident, SeaWorld faced intense scrutiny. The attack was attributed to a mistake in cueing during the performance, with Orky 2 inadvertently landing on John and Corky. However, many questioned the safety protocols in place, and the decision to allow trainers to perform such routines with large, powerful animals. The incident led to a reevaluation of safety measures, with SeaWorld implementing stricter guidelines for trainer-animal interactions. John's life was irrevocably changed. He retired from his position as a marine mammal trainer, dedicating himself to advocacy for ethical treatment of marine animals and the importance of safety in marine parks. His story became a cautionary tale, highlighting the inherent risks of working with wild animals in captivity and the need for constant vigilance and respect for their power and unpredictability. The incident also sparked a broader conversation about the ethics of keeping marine mammals in captivity. Animal rights activists used the attack as evidence of the dangers posed to both trainers and animals in such environments. The debate intensified, leading to increased public awareness and calls for reform in the treatment of marine life. In the years that followed, SeaWorld faced additional incidents involving orcas and trainers, further fueling the debate over the ethics of captivity. The company eventually announced the end of its orca breeding program and the cessation of theatrical orca shows, marking a significant shift in its approach to marine mammal entertainment. Thank you for watching. Orcas, known for their incredible power and grace, can turn unexpectedly dangerous, even for the trainers who share deep bonds with them. In our next video, we reveal the tragic story of Maris Ellington, a marine biologist who believed her unbreakable connection with Neptune, the park's star Orca, would keep her safe. But what happens when that bond is tested in the most horrifying way? Maris's story is unlike any other, as trust between trainer and Orca is shattered in a terrifying moment that would change her life forever. Click now to witness the shocking turn of events and discover the true cost of ignoring the warning signs.